All right, we are on chapter 16. We get help from a thief. Here's my definition of not fun. Fly a Pegasus toward an out-of-control helicopter. If Guido had been any less of a fancy flyer, we would have been chopped to confetti. I could hear Rachel screaming inside. For some reason, she hadn't fallen asleep, but I could see the pilot slumped over the controls, pitching back and forth as the helicopter wobbled toward the side of an office building. Ideas? I asked Annabeth. You're going to have to take Guido and get out, she said. What are you going to do? In response, she said, "Hi-ya," and Guido went into a nosedive. Duck, Annabeth yelled. We passed so close to the rotors, I felt the force of the blades ripping at my hair. We zipped along the side of the helicopter, and Annabeth grabbed the door. That's when things went wrong. Guido's wings slammed against the helicopter. He plummeted straight down with me on his back, leaving Annabeth dangling from the side of the aircraft. I was so terrified I could barely think, but as Guido spiraled, I caught a glimpse of Rachel pulling Annabeth inside of the copter. Hang in there, I yelled at Guido. My wing, he moaned. It's busted. You can do it. I desperately tried to remember what Selina used to tell us in Pegasus riding lessons. Just relax the wing, extend it, and glide. We fell like a rock, straight toward the pavement, 300 feet below, and at the last moment Guido extended his wings. I saw the faces of centaurs gaping at us, and we pulled out of our dive, sailed 50 feet, and tumbled onto the pavement, Pegasus over demigod. Ow, Guido moaned. My legs, my head, my wings. Chiron galloped over with his medical pouch and began working on the Pegasus. I got to my feet. When I looked up, my heart crawled into my throat. The helicopter was only a few seconds away from slamming into the side of the building. Then, miraculously, the helicopter righted itself, spun in a circle, and hovered. Very slowly, it began to descend. It seemed to take forever, but finally the helicopter thudded to a landing in the middle of Fifth Avenue. I looked at the windshield and couldn't believe what I was seeing. Annabeth was at the controls. I ran forward as the rotor spun to a stop. Rachel opened the side door and dragged out the pilot. She was still dressed like she was on vacation, in beach shorts, a t-shirt, and sandals. Her hair was tangled and her face was green from the helicopter ride. Annabeth climbed out last. I stared at her in awe. I didn't know you could fly a helicopter. Neither did I, she said. My dad's crazy into aviation. Plus, Atlas had some notes on flying mechanics. I just took my best guess on the controls. You saved my life, Rachel said. Annabeth flexed her bad shoulder. Yeah, well, let's not make a habit of it. What are you doing here, Dare? Don't you know better than to fly into a war zone? Rachel glanced at me. I had to be here. I knew Percy was in trouble. Got that right, Annabeth grumbled. Well, if you'll excuse me, I have some injured friends I have to attend to. Glad you could stop by, Rachel. Annabeth, I called. She stormed off. Rachel plopped down on the curb and put her head in her hands. I'm sorry, Percy, I didn't mean to. I always mess things up. It was kind of hard to argue with her, though I was glad she was safe. I looked in the direction Annabeth had gone, but she disappeared into the crowd. I couldn't believe what she'd just done. Saved Rachel's life, landed a helicopter, and walked away like it was no big deal. It's okay, I told Rachel, though my words sounded hollow. So, what's the message you wanted to deliver? She frowned. How did you know about that? A dream. Rachel didn't look surprised. She tugged out her beach shorts. They were covered in drawings, which wasn't unusual for her, but these symbols I recognized. Greek letters, pictures from Camp Beads, sketches of monsters, faces of gods. Didn't understand how Rachel could have known about some of that. She'd never been to Olympus or Camp Half-Blood. I've been seeing things, too, she muttered. I mean, not just through the mist. This is different. I've been drawing pictures, writing lines. In ancient Greek, I said. Do you know what they say? That's what I wanted to talk to you about. I was hoping, if you had gone on with us on vacation, I was hoping you could help me figure out what's happening to me. She looked at me pleadingly. Her face was sunburned from the beach. Her nose was peeling. Couldn't get over the shock that she was here in person. She forced her family to cut short their vacation, agreed to go to a horrible school, and flew in a helicopter into a monster battle just to see me. In her own way, she was as brave as Annabeth. But what was happening to her with these visions really freaked me out. Maybe it was something that happened to all mortals who could see through the mist, but my mom had never talked about anything like that. And Hestia's words about Luke's mom kept coming back to me. Meg Stellan went too far. She tried to see too much. Rachel, I said, I wish I knew. Maybe we should ask Chiron. She flinched like she'd gotten an electric shock. Percy, something is about to happen. A trick that ends in death. What do you mean? Whose death? I don't know. She looked around nervously. Don't you feel it? Is that the message you wanted to tell me? No, she hesitated. I'm sorry, I'm not making sense. But that thought just came to me. The message I wrote on the beach was different. It had your name in it. Perseus, I remembered, in ancient Greek. Rachel nodded. I don't know its meaning, but I know it's important. You have to hear it. It said, Perseus, you are not the hero. I stared at her like she just slapped me. You came thousands of miles to tell me I'm not the hero? It's important, she insisted. It will affect what you do. Not the hero of the prophecy, I asked? Not the hero who defeats Kronos? What do you mean? I'm sorry, Percy, that's all I know. I had to tell you because... Well, Chiron cantered over, this must be Miss Dare. I wanted to yell at him to go away, but of course I couldn't. Try to get my emotions under control. I felt like I had another personal hurricane swirling around me. Chiron, Rachel Dare, I said. Rachel, this is my teacher, Chiron. Hello, Rachel said glumly. She didn't look all that surprised to see Chiron as a centaur. You are not asleep, Miss Dare, he noticed, and yet you are mortal. I'm mortal, she agreed, like it was a depressing thought. The pilot fell asleep as soon as we passed the river. I don't know why I didn't. I just knew I had to be here to warn Percy. Warn Percy? She's been saying things, I said, writing lines and making drawings. Chiron raised an eyebrow. Indeed, tell me. She told him the same thing she told me. Chiron stroked his beard. Miss Dare, perhaps we should talk. Chiron, I blurted. I had a sudden terrible image of Camp Half-Blood in the 1990s and make Stellan scream coming from the attic. You'll help Rachel, right? I mean, you'll warn her that she's got to be careful with this stuff, not go too far. His tail flicked like it does when he's nervous. Yes, Percy, I will do my best to understand what is happening and advise Miss Dare, but this may take some time. Meanwhile, you should rest. We've moved your parents' car to safety. The enemy seems to be staying put for now. They've set bunks in the Empire State Building. Get some sleep. Everybody keeps telling me to sleep, I grumbled. I don't need sleep. Chiron managed to smile. Have you looked at yourself recently, Percy? I glanced down at my clothes, which were scorched, burned, sliced, tattered from the night of constant battles. I look like death, I admitted. But you think I can sleep after what just happened? You may be invulnerable in combat, Chiron chided, but that only makes your body tired faster. I remember Achilles. Whenever that lad wasn't fighting, he was sleeping. Must have taken 20 naps a day. You, Percy, need your rest. You may be our only hope. I wanted to complain that I wasn't their only hope. According to Rachel, I wasn't even the hero. But the look in Chiron's eyes made it clear he wasn't going to take no for an answer. Sure, I grumbled. Talk. I trudged toward the Empire State Building. When I glanced back, Rachel and Chiron were walking together in earnest conversation, like they were discussing funeral arrangements. Inside the lobby, I found an empty bunk and collapsed, sure that I would never be able to sleep. A second later, my eyes closed. In my dreams, I was back in Hades' garden. The Lord of the Dead paced up and down, holding his ears while Nico followed him, waving his arms. You have to, Nico insisted. Demeter and Persephone sat behind them at the breakfast table. Both of the goddesses looked bored. Demeter poured shredded wheat into 4 huge bowls. Persephone was magically changing the flower arrangements on the table, turning the blossoms from red to yellow to polka-dotted. I don't have to do anything, Hades' eyes blazed. I'm a god. Father, Nico said, if Olympus falls, your own palace's safety doesn't matter. You'll fade too. I am not an Olympian, he growled. My family has made that quite clear. You are, Nico said, whether you like it or not. You saw what they did to your mother, Hades said. Zeus killed her, and you would have me help them? They deserve what they get. Persephone sighed. She walked her fingers across the table, absently turning the silverware into roses. Could we please now talk about that woman? You know what would help this boy, Demeter mused. Farming. Persephone rolled her eyes. Mother. 6 months behind a plow. Excellent character building. Nico stepped in front of his father, forcing Hades to face him. My mother understood about family. That's why she didn't want to leave us. You can't just abandon your family because it did something horrible. You've done horrible things to them, too. Maria died, Hades reminded him. You can't just cut yourself off from other gods. I've done very well at it for thousands of years. And has that made you feel any better? Nico demanded. Has that curse on the oracle helped you at all? Holding grudges is a fatal flaw. Bianca warned me about that. She was right. For demigods, I am immortal, all-powerful. I would not help the other gods if they begged me, if Percy Jackson himself pleaded. You're just as much of an outcast as I am, Nico yelled. Stop being angry about it and do something helpful for once. That's the only way they'll respect you. Hades' palm filled with black fire. Go ahead, Nico said. Blast me. That's what the other gods would expect from you. Prove them right. Yes, please, Demeter complained. Shut him up. Persephone sighed. Oh, I don't know. I would rather fight in the war than eat another bowl of cereal. This is boring. Hades roared in anger. His fireball hit a silver tree right next to Nico, melting it into a pool of liquid metal. My dream changed. I was standing outside the United Nations, about a mile northeast of the Empire State Building. The Titan army had set up camp all around the UN complex. The flagpoles were hung with horrible trophies, helmets and armor pieces from defeated campers. All along First Avenue, giants sharpened their axes. Telkines repaired armor at makeshift forges. Kronos himself paced at the top of the plaza, swinging his scythe so his Drakon bodyguard stayed way back. Ethan Nakamura and Prometheus stood nearby. Out of slicing range, Ethan was fidgeting with his shield straps. But Prometheus looked as calm and collected as ever in his tuxedo. I hate this place, Kronos growled. United Nations, as if mankind could ever unite. Remind me to tear down this building after we destroy Olympus. Yes, Lord, Prometheus smiled, as if his master's anger amused him. Shall we tear down the stables in Central Park too? I know how much horses can annoy you. Don't mock me, Prometheus. These cursed centaurs will be sorry they interfered. They will feed them to hellhounds, starting with that son of mine, that weakling Chiron. Prometheus shrugged. That weakling destroyed an entire legion of Telkines with his arrows. Kronos swung his scythe and cut a flagpole in half. The national colors of Brazil toppled into the army, squashing a Drakon. We will destroy them, Kronos roared. It is time to unleash the Drakon. Nakamura, you will do this. Yes, Lord, at sunset? No, Kronos said, immediately. The defenders of Olympus are badly wounded. They will not expect a quick attack. Besides, we know the Drakon cannot be beat. Ethan looked confused. My lord. Never you mind, Nakamura. Just do my bidding. I want Olympus in ruins by the time Typhon reaches New York. We will break the gods utterly. But my lord, Ethan said, your regeneration. Kronos pointed at Ethan, and the demigod froze. Does it seem, Kronos hissed, that I need to regenerate? Ethan didn't respond. Kind of hard to do when you're immobilized in time. Kronos snapped his fingers and Ethan collapsed. Soon, the Titan growled. This form will be unnecessary. I will not rest with victory so close. Now go. Ethan scrambled away. This is dangerous, my lord, Prometheus warned. Do not be hasty. Hasty. After festering for 3,000 years in the depths of Tartarus, you call me hasty. I have sliced Percy Jackson into 1,000 pieces. Thrice you fought him, Prometheus pointed out. And yet you've always said it is beneath the dignity of a Titan to fight a mere mortal. I wonder if your mortal host is influencing you, weakening your judgment. Kronos turned his golden eyes on the other Titan. You call me weak. No, my lord, I only meant... Are your loyalties divided? Kronos asked. Perhaps you miss your old friends, the gods. Would you like to join them? Prometheus paled. I misspoke, my lord. Your orders are to be carried out. He turned to the armies and shouted, Prepare for battle. The troops began to stir. From somewhere behind the UN compound, an angry roar shook the city, the sound of the Drakon wakening. The noise was so horrible it woke me, and I realized I could still hear it from a mile away. Grover stood next to me, looking nervous. What was that? They're coming, I told him, and we're in trouble. The Hephaestus cabin was out of Greek fire. The Apollo cabin and the hunters were scrounging for arrows. Most of us already ingested so much ambrosia and nectar that we didn't dare take any more. We had 16 campers, 15 hunters, and half a dozen sailors left in fighting shape. The rest had taken refuge on Olympus. The party ponies tried to form ranks, but they staggered and giggled and all smelled like root beer. The Texans were headbutting the Coloradians, and the Missouri branch was arguing with Illinois. The chances were pretty good the whole army would end up fighting each other rather than the enemy. Chiron trotted up with Rachel on his back. I felt a twinge of annoyance because Chiron rarely gave anyone a ride, and never a mortal. Your friend here has some useful insights, Percy, he said. Rachel blushed. Just some things I saw in my head. A Drakon, Chiron said. A Lydian Drakon, to be exact. The oldest and most dangerous kind. I stared at her. How did you know that? I'm not sure, Rachel admitted, but this Drakon has a particular fate. It will be killed by a child of Ares. Annabeth crossed her arms. How can you possibly know that? I just saw it. Can't explain. Well, let's hope you're wrong, I said, because we're a little short of children of Ares. A horrible thought occurred to me, and I cursed in ancient Greek. What? Annabeth asked her. The spy, I told her. Kronos said we know they cannot beat this Drakon. The spy's been keeping him updated. Kronos knows the Ares cabin isn't with us. He intentionally picked a monster we can't kill. Thalia scowled. If I ever catch your spy, he's going to be very sorry. Maybe we should send another messenger to camp. I've already done it, Chiron said. Blackjack is on his way, but if Selina wasn't able to convince Clarisse, I doubt Blackjack will be able. A roar shook the ground, and it sounded very close. Rachel, I said, get inside the building. I want to stay. A shadow blotted out the sun across the street. The Drakon slithered down the side of a skyscraper, and it roared. 1,000 windows shattered. On second thought, Rachel said in a small voice, I'll be inside. Let me explain. There are dragons and there are drakons. Drakons are several millennia older than dragons and much larger. They look like giant serpents. Most don't have wings, most don't breathe fire, though some do. All are poisonous. All are immensely strong with scales harder than titanium. Their eyes can paralyze you, not to turn you to stone Medusa-type paralysis, but the oh my gods, that snake is going to eat me type of paralysis, which is just as bad. We have Drakon fighting classes at camp, but there is no way to prepare yourself for a 200-foot-long serpent, thick as a school bus, slithering down the side of a building, its yellow eyes like searchlights, and its mouth full of razor-sharp teeth, big enough to chew elephants. It almost made me long for flying pigs. Meanwhile, the enemy army advanced down Fifth Avenue. We'd done our best to push the cars out of the way, to keep the mortals safe, but that just made it easier for our enemies to approach. The party ponies swished their tails nervously. Chiron galloped up and down their ranks, shouting encouragement. To stand tough and think about victory and root beer, but I figured any second they would panic and run. I'll take the Drakon. My voice came out as timid and squeak. Then I yelled louder. I'll take the Drakon. Everyone else hold the line against the army. Annabeth stood next to me. She pulled her owl helmet low over her face, but I could tell her eyes were red. Will you help me? I asked. That's what I do, she said miserably. I help my friends. I felt like a complete jerk. I wanted to pull her aside and explain that I didn't mean for Rachel to be here, that it wasn't my idea, but we had no time. Go invisible, I said. Look for weak links in its armor. While I keep it busy. Just be careful. I whistled. Mrs. O'Leary, heal! Woof! The hellhound jumped over a line of centaurs and gave me a kiss that smelled suspiciously of pepperoni pizza. I drew my sword and charged the monster. The Drakon was 3 stories above us, slithering sideways along the buildings as it sized up our forces. Wherever it looked, centaurs froze in fear. From the north, the enemy army crashed into the party ponies, and our lines broke. The Drakon lashed out, swallowing 3 Californian centaurs in one gulp before I could even get close. Mrs. O'Leary launched herself into the air, a deadly black shadow with teeth and claws. Normally, a pouncing hellhound is a terrifying sight, but next to the Drakon, Mrs. O'Leary looked like a child's night-night doll. Her claws raked harmlessly on the Drakon's scales. She bit the monster's throat, but couldn't make a dent. Her weight, however, was enough to knock the Drakon off the side of the building. It flailed awkwardly and crashed to the sidewalk. The hellhound and serpent twisting and thrashing. Drakon tried to bite Miss O'Leary, but she was too close to the serpent's mouth. Poison spewed everywhere, melting centaurs into dust, along with quite a few monsters. But Mrs. O'Leary weaved around the serpent's head, scratching and biting. I plunged Riptide deep into the monster's left eye. The spotlight went dark, and the Drakon hissed, reared back to strike, but I rolled aside. It bit a swimming pool-sized chunk out of the pavement. It turned toward me with its good eye, and I focused on its teeth so I wouldn't get paralyzed. Miss O'Leary did her best to cause a distraction. She leaped onto the serpent's head and scratched and growled like a really angry black wig. The rest of the battle wasn't going well. The centaurs had panicked under the onslaught of giants and demons. An occasional orange camp t-shirt appeared in the sea of fighting, but quickly disappeared. Arrows screamed, fire exploded in waves across both armies, but the action was moving across the street to the entrance of the Empire State Building. We were losing ground. Suddenly, Annabeth materialized on the Drakon's back. Her invisibility cap rolled off her head, and she drove her bronze knife between a chink in the serpent's scales. The Drakon roared. It coiled around, knocking Annabeth off its back. I reached her just as she hit the ground, dragged her out of the way as the serpent rolled, crushing a lamppost right where she'd been. "Thanks," she said. "I told you to be careful." "Yeah, well, duck." It was her turn to save me. She tackled as the monster's teeth snapped over my head. Miss O'Leary body slammed the dragon's face to get its attention, and we rolled out of the way. Meanwhile, our allies had retreated to the doors of the Empire State Building. The entire army was surrounding them. We were out of options. No more help was coming. Annabeth and I would have to retreat before we were cut off from Mount Olympus. Then I heard the rumbling in the south. It wasn't a sound you hear much in New York, but I recognized it immediately. Chariot wheels. A girl's voice yelled, "Ares!" And a dozen more chariots charged into battle. Each flew a red banner with the symbol of a wild boar's head. Each was pulled by a team of skeletal horses with manes of fire. A total of 30 fresh warriors, armor gleaming and eyes full of hate, lowered their lances as one, making a bristling wall of death. "The children of Ares," Annabeth said in amazement. "How did Rachel know?" I didn't have an answer, but leading the charge was a girl in familiar red armor, her face covered by a boar's head helm. She held aloft a spear and crackled with energy. Clarisse herself had come to the rescue. While half her chariots charged the monster army, Clarisse led the other 6 straight for the Drakon. The serpent reared back and managed to throw off Miss O'Leary. My poor pet hit the side of a building with a yelp. I ran to help her, but with the serpent had already zeroed in on a new threat. Even with one eye, its glare was enough to paralyze 2 chariot drivers. They veered into a line of cars. The other 4 chariots kept charging. The monster bared its fangs to strike and got a mouthful of celestial bronze javelins. "Ees!" it screamed, which is probably Drakon for ow. "Ares, to me!" Clarisse screamed. Her voice sounded shriller than usual, but I guess I wasn't surprised given what she'd been fighting. Across the street, the arrival of 6 chariots gave the party ponies new hope. They rallied at the doors of the Empire State Building, and the enemy army was momentarily thrown into confusion. Meanwhile, Clarisse's chariot circled the Drakon. Lances broke against the monster's skin. Skeletal horses breathed fire and whinnied. 2 more chariots overturned, but the warriors simply leaped to their feet, drew their swords, and went to work. They hacked at chinks in the creature's scales, dodged poison spray like they'd been training for this all their lives, which, of course, they had. No one could say the Ares campers weren't brave. Clarisse was right there in front, stabbing her spear at the Drakon's face, trying to put out its other eye. But as I watched, things started to go wrong. The Drakon snapped up one of the Ares campers in a gulp and knocked aside another, and sprayed poison on the third, who retreated in panic, his armor melting. "We have to help," Annabeth said. She was right. I'd just been standing there frozen in amazement. Miss O'Leary tried to get up but yelped again, and one of her paws was bleeding. "Stay back, girl," I told her. "You've done enough already." Annabeth and I jumped onto the monster's back and ran toward its head, trying to draw its attention away from Clarisse. Her cabin mates threw javelins, most of which broke, but some lodged in the monster's teeth. It snapped its jaws together until its mouth was a mess of green blood. Yellow, foamy poison splintered weapons. "You can do it," I screamed at Clarisse. "A child of Ares is destined to kill it." Through her war helmet, I could only see her eyes, but I could tell something was wrong. Her blue eyes shone with fear. Clarisse never looked like that. And she didn't have blue eyes. "Ares!" she shouted in a strangely shrill voice. She leveled her spear and charged the Drakon. "No," I muttered. "Wait!" But the monster looked down at her, almost in contempt, and spit poison directly in her face. She screamed and fell. "Clarisse!" Annabeth jumped off the monster's back and ran to help, while the Ares campers tried to defend their fallen counselor. I drove Riptide between 2 of the creature's scales, managed to turn its attention on me. I got thrown, but I landed on my feet. "Come on, you stupid worm, look at me." And for the next several minutes, all I saw were teeth. I retreated and dodged poison, but I couldn't hurt the thing. At the edge of my vision, I saw a flying chariot land on 5th Avenue. Then someone ran toward us. A girl's voice shaken with grief and cried, "No, curse you, why?" I dared to glance over, but what I saw made no sense. Clarisse was lying on the ground where she'd fallen. Her armor was smoked with poison. Annabeth and the Ares campers were trying to unfasten her helmet. And kneeling next to them, her face blotchy with tears, was a girl in camp clothes. It was Clarisse? My head spun. Why hadn't I noticed it before? The girl in Clarisse's armor was much thinner, not as tall, but why would somebody pretend to be Clarisse? I was so stunned the Drakon almost snapped me in half. It dodged, and the beast buried its head back into a brick wall. Why? The rogue Clarisse demanded, holding the other girl in her arms, while the camper struggled to remove the poison-corroded helmet. Chris Rodriguez ran from the flying chariot. He and Clarisse must have ridden it here from camp, chasing the Ares campers who had mistakenly been following the other girl, thinking she was Clarisse. But it still made no sense. The Drakon tugged its head from the brick wall and screamed in rage. "Look out," Chris warned. Instead of turning toward me, the Drakon whirled toward the sound of Chris's voice. It bared its fangs at the group of demigods. The real Clarisse looked up at the Drakon, her face filled with absolute hate. I'd seen that intense look only once before. Her father, Ares, had worn the same expression when I fought him in single-death combat. "You want death?" Clarisse screamed at the Drakon. "Well, come on." She grabbed her spear from the fallen girl. With no armor or shield, she charged the Drakon. I tried to close the distance to help, but Clarisse was faster. She leaped aside as the monster struck, pulverizing the ground in front of her. She then jumped onto the creature's head as it reared up. She drove her electric spear into its good eye. With so much force, it shattered the shaft, releasing all the magic weapon's power. Electricity arced across the creature's head, causing the whole body to shudder. Clarisse jumped free, rolling safely to the sidewalk. As smoke boiled from the Drakon's mouth, the Drakon's flesh dissolved, and it collapsed into a hollow, scaly tunnel of armor. The rest of us stared at Clarisse in awe. I had never seen anyone take down such a huge monster single-handedly, but Clarisse didn't seem to care. She ran back to the wounded girl who'd stolen her armor. Finally, Annabeth managed to remove the girl's helmet. We all gathered around, the Ares campers, Chris, Clarisse, Annabeth, and me. The battle still raged along Fifth Avenue, but for that moment nothing existed except the small circle and the fallen girl. Her features, once beautiful, were badly burned from poison. I could tell that no amount of nectar or ambrosia would save her. "Something is about to happen," Rachel's words rang in my ears. "A trick that ends in death." Now I knew what she meant. I knew who had led the Ares cabin into battle. I looked down at the dying face of Selina Beauregard. Alright, that is the end of chapter 16.